It is the 1st of July. This is Rabbi Furst, Pirkei Avos.
Everyone today.
Good morning, Rabbi Furst.
Hashem.
Hashem. Hashem.
Hashem, very good.
Me'er is coming.
Okay, very good. Good morning, Mayor. Okay.
Now we can. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Right, then I can hear you.
Let's see here. Okay, I'm just going to put this on the screen. Again, good morning, Rabbi. This is Rabbi Shlomo Furst here, Yeshiva Samanavshi. Here we're learning in our first year, Pirkei Avos, learning about the mimer of Rabbi Elazar ben Modai in the third parak, that HaOmer Mechalas HaKodshim Mavazes HaMoyedois Mabim Penei Chavero Barabim Mefer Briso Shal Avram Avinu Avos Shalom, person who forsakes the covenant, the bris of Avram Avinu Avos Shalom, and if he's Megala Panim with Toshok Allah, Alpha Pishesh Biado, even though he may have to his credit Torah Umaisim Toivim, Eno Lechelek Lo Olam Haba. Okay, so we're in the middle of the explanation of the Radak, why the reference to Oro and Oro is a expression which is unbecoming. It's not a praiseworthy connotation, and the question is why, and that's based on the pasuk. Let's just maybe review the pasuk here. Let me put this on the screen so you can see where we are. Getting spotlight. Okay, right there. If you see the arrow, you see where the pasuk in Yirmiyah is, right there. Let's just repeat the pasuk, because the whole source of this point, which was mentioned in the Rambam, is based on that pasuk. So let's look at the pasuk. That's all based on a Gemara. This is a Gemara, by the way. Gemara says that the expression of oral is an unbecoming connotation, and we're trying to understand why. So let's just go back to the pasuk. We'll see the Rambam after that, and then we'll continue on. Who would like to do something?
I would.
Okay, go ahead.
Ki chol hagoyim arelim v'chol beis Yisrael arle lev. Because all non-Jews are uncircumcised, and all Jews are uncircumcised in their hearts.
So based on that, the Gemara makes an inference from that, which is basically the Rambam. If you go two lines up, you see the Rambam. What does the Rambam say?
Ma'osa hi ha'arla she nisganu ba hagoyim shene'amar ki chol hagoyim arelim. So Amosu we translated as despicable,
Right.
Despicable foreskins, etc. Vartem, and we translated Vartem. Let's see, how do we translate that? Vartem lo nishalem ad she nimo.
Abraham lo nimshal.
Oh, Abraham. That's why I couldn't figure it out. and of Abraham, he was not complete until he circumcised and he was called perfect, as to say, without a blemish.
Right. Now, I have to try and realize the significance of this. We're referring to Avram Avinu. Now, Avram Avinu was circumcised when he was 100 years old, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes.
And so Avram Avinu had a lot to his credit. He had a tremendous amount of things to his credit at that time. He was by no means a person whose place in this world was not fulfilled and was lacking. Nevertheless, until he had the bris milah, was not considered to be perfect. Meaning, having the orla is a sign of imperfection. So in that way, we apply it to the rest of the world, that they, and you take any one of the non-Jews in any particular generation, they're all going to be obviously on a less of a level of accomplishment than Avram Avinu. Very few people who have ever lived in this world can claim to have accomplished as much as Avram Avinu accomplished. And nevertheless, Avram Avinu was lacking perfection until he had finally the milah. So lack of perfection, that's something which is should be very bothersome to a person. That's what we mentioned yesterday. The Mishna Shashaim says lack of perfection is a great source of distress for those people, particularly people who are what the Mesilas Yesharim calls Shlomi Hadash. Shlomi Hadash is in the fourth chapter of Mesilas Yesharim. The Mesilas Yesharim says there are basically three categories of people. Whether he's primarily talking about in terms of the Jewish people, but three primary categories of people. One are called the Shlomi Hadash, those that have a perfection in their attitude and in their understanding of what life is all about. Then you have those who are somewhat less than them, and then finally you have the common people, the rest of the population. So Shlomi Hadash, they're called perfect in their understanding because they realize what they're supposed to be accomplishing in this world, and anything less than true perfection is going to be something which is very disturbing to them. So translating that into our conversation now with bris milah, having the orla, having the foreskin, that represents a lack of perfection. So that lack of perfection is what's considered to be despicable, right? The fact that they are incomplete, they're not shalom, they're not perfect. That lack of perfection is something which is something to be despised, and it's not to be viewed as to be to the non-Jews' credit. So even though, and that's what we'll see in the Radak now is going to explain, right? And he makes clear mention that they're not commanded in it, even though they're not commanded in it. Nevertheless, the fact that they lack this perfection is still something to their discredit, to their disgrace.
So
Let's
why
take a
did
look at
Abraham
that.
wait until he was 100?
Well, the Meforshim explained that Avraham, even though he knew there was a mitzvah of bris milah, but there's a general cloud that gadol hamitzuva she'ena mitzuva. It's greater a person who's commanded to do something than a person who's not commanded to do something. And this particular mitzvah, Avraham wanted to have the command to do it directly from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He knew there was such a mitzvah as bris milah, but he didn't want to do it, initiate it on his own. He preferred that he have the command from a Kadosh Baruch Hu to be on a higher level, that there's a higher level of a person doing a mitzvah if he's commanded than if a person is simply doing it voluntarily. It's sort of counterintuitive. You would think, who's on a higher level, a person who's commanded to do something or a person who is doing something voluntarily? You would think that a person who's a volunteer is on a higher level than a person who is obligated to do something. But according to Tosfos explains the reason why the person who's commanded to do something is on a higher level of a person who's not commanded to do something, because a person who's commanded to do something, he's obligated in it, he's held responsible for accomplishing it, and if he doesn't do it, if he fails to do it, right, he bears the responsibility of the non-accomplishment. But whereas a person who's a volunteer, right, if a person doesn't do what he's volunteering for, so there's no consequences and there's no ramifications, there's no concern that he'll be held responsible for not doing what he volunteered to do. So therefore, the person who's commanded is on a higher level than a person who is simply doing it voluntarily. So therefore, Avraham wanted to have the mitzvah of bris milah not from a voluntary point of view, but rather from a obligatory point of view.
So he allowed himself for, I'm not sure, he became aware, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, to be a despicable disgrace because he wanted this command.
Yeah, I think there's a medrash that that when a Kadosh Baruch Hu appeared to him, I think Avraham fell down, and because he was disgraced because he didn't have the milah. I'm not sure. It's been a long time since I've seen the medrash. I'd have to take a look and look at it inside to quote it correctly. But yeah, it was not a source of pride to be uncircumcised.
And it refers to it as a mum. But a mum, I always thought a mum was an imperfection that came about due to some cause, not a something that was inborn. Person can be born, an animal can be born with a mum.
Right, it's true.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't have to come. It usually, I mean, generally, it's in some type of imperfection. Sometimes it can be a cause by a cause. Sometimes it can be there. No matter what, I think maybe what you're asking is, how can something which is created, meaning Kadosh Baruch created it this way, how can that be considered the mum if Hashem created it that way? Maybe that's
not only that, but Hashem created it that way, and it's perfectly functioning. I mean, if somebody's born with the cleft palate or a club foot, that's clearly, you know, it's not functioning right. He's not able to walk right. He's not able to swallow right or whatever. But in this case, it functions perfectly fine.
So well, actually not so. Um, the part of the function of bris milah, I think that isn't that what I sent to the newsletter to this week? Isn't that what I part of what I sent? That the connection between learning Torah and bris milah.
I think so, yeah.
Right. So if you look there, there's a very strong connection between the ability of a person to learn Torah and bris milah. That's what we're going to follow up this week's newsletter article with the story of Onkelos. Maybe we'll maybe for next week we can actually learn that. Maybe it's a medrash. Maybe we can actually learn the medrash inside. Very insightful into the connection between bris milah and the ability to learn Torah. So the physical aspect of the person has a very strong influence on his connection and association and ability to learn Torah. So so it has more ramifications.
Doesn't relate to a non-Jew.
Well, to tell you the truth, the Jews they also have at least 7. We learned the Gemara, maybe even 30 mitzvahs that they're responsible for, and any mitzvahs that they're responsible for, they certainly have an obligation to know them, and there certainly is an ability and a need for them to know clearly what they're expected to do, right? So, and if they're not, again, it's not necessary from the point of view of a mitzvah that they circumcise themselves, but and I'm not sure, this is conjecture, I don't know, but it could be that if they would circumcise themselves, they may have an easier time understanding their obligations of serving Kadosh Baruch Hu in this world. I don't know. Like I said, it's conjecture. I have no proof to that, but logically speaking, it could be true.
Nowadays, particularly in America, I think many non-Jews are circumcised.
Yeah, well, I mean, according to the health officials, they kind of vacillate in their philosophies whether bris milah is a good thing in terms of the health. I mean, look, we know the Muslims give bris milah. They give bris milah because they also, because Ishmael also had bris milah. So that's part of their tradition as well.
Right.
That's a whole separate topic because they don't do bris milah the way we do there. You need the removal of the foreskin, and then you need the priya, the cutting of the membrane that surrounds that's below the bris milah. And so what's actually considered to be an oral, someone who's uncircumcised, could be that, I mean, that's part of what the question you were asking, which we haven't gotten to yet also, is if a person had a medical surgery to remove the foreskin, is that considered to be that he's circumcised or not?
Right.
So we'll be getting to that. We'll hopefully maybe start working on that question next week.
I was asking about Abraham Avinu's decision to forego the bris, even though it's such a negative thing. I mean, I understand we're saying that it's better to do it with a commandment, but it's so terrible to be without a circumcision. You'd think that, I mean, he certainly did many mitzvahs without being commanded. So you would think that he would say, okay, this is one of the ones I'm going to do without being commanded, because it's so horrible to be living in this despicable state.
Right. Uh, yeah, look, I agree. Obviously, look, HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Avraham knew this, um, that whenever HaKadosh Baruch Hu demanded and required something of Avraham Avinu, he, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't hesitate to reveal himself to Avraham Avinu. As a matter of fact, after he did the bris milah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to mavaka him, right? The whole situation there of Bikur Cholim, right? So we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had no lack of relationship with Avraham Avinu, and had Hashem wanted to um, command him earlier, he definitely would have commanded him earlier, right? So obviously
Right.
there was some benefit in him not being circumcised before the time Hashem commanded it. What that is, I'm not really sure. I can't really answer that question.
It's hard to understand. The more I think about it, the more I come up with problems. Um, he he was uh, he was learning Torah before he got the circumcision. He was learning Torah from, I guess, when he was 3 or when he was uh, 20 or 50, or I'm not sure exactly, but I know that he kept the whole Torah, and it was because he was able to derive it from his observations of the world. That requires quite a lot of thinking, deep thinking. How could he do that when he just said that a person can't really think deeply in that way when he's uncircumcised?
Right. So yeah, if we look at the sequence of events, so Avraham had one child. He had Ishmael, and he had Ishmael when he was still uncircumcised. Then finally, he was given the command, right? When Ishmael was 13 years old, um, Avraham was commanded that he and his son, his oldest household, should be circumcised. Then, a year later, he had his second son, his true son Yitzchak, the son that he bore from Sarah, right, at the age of over 100. And so we see that the bris milah also was very instrumental in the bringing of Yitzchak into this world, right?
Right.
For whatever reasons, again, why Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted Avraham to wait till he was 100 years old to have Yitzchak, right? That there are commentaries which speak about that. That question is dealt with and discussed. Um, but the necessity of waiting for the bris milah, um, obviously there were many different factors. Kadosh Baruch Hu, for example, didn't want and allow Avraham to have the child he was hoping and waiting and praying for such a long time, because the prayers that Akash Baruch Hu wanted from Avraham had to reach a certain level of intensity that Akash Baruch Hu um, was, the Gemara says, was mitzapeh. He was expecting, he was desirous um, of the prayers of Avraham Avinu and of Sarah, and therefore he made them both in being incapable of having children. So therefore, because of the intensity that Hashem desired for them to pray, Kadosh Baruch Hu made them incapable of having children. So they should pray specifically; they should have children that They were, because the Gemara says both Avram Avinu and Sarah, they did not have the physical capability of having children. They Sarah, for example, had no womb, and Avram Avinu was not able physically to have children. So the the necessity of the prayers that Hashem desired was required for things and reasons that I'm not sure of. I can't answer those questions because I don't know. I'm sure Chazal speak about it to some extent, but Chazal do say that Hashem was desirous of the prayers of Avram Avinu and Sarah to such an extent that that's specifically why he held back from them the ability to have children, because he wanted them to pray to such an extent that they should be able to actually, through their prayers, change change the nature of things, change their own physical nature. And that's basically a lesson for us, that they were going to be the father and mother of Klal Yisrael for all generations, and they had to bequeath to Klal Yisrael this koach and the understanding of the significance of prayer. If it wasn't for the fact that we had the Avos, Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, and Yaakov Avinu, and also Sarah Imenu and Rachel Imenu and Rivka Imenu, we wouldn't have the ability to pray that would be so strong that it could actually change the physical nature of things. Of course, all according to the will and desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing and wanting and desirous of hearing our prayers to do those things. And if necessary, he is able, obviously, to do those things. So not having the child until one being 100, not having the bris milah until he was also that age as well, 99, that was all part of the plan that HaKadosh Baruch Hu required. And so therefore, the lack of perfection that Avraham Avinu had, meaning again, not having a child is also a lack of perfection, right? Because I'll speak very strongly on a person who didn't bear children. He's lacking a great aspect of perfection. So that was also a source of distress to Avraham Avinu, not having children. He lacked that perfection, and but even though that he didn't have children yet, but once he had the bris milah, now he's considered shalem, right? He was now perfect, and now once he has reached that stage, a state of perfection, that state of perfection Avraham Avinu had reached at the time when he now Brima now allowed him to have a yitzchak. At that stage, he was now allowed to have a yitzchak because he had now come to a stage of perfection, which now allowed him that he should be a father to a son, and on the level and the virtuous status of a Yitzchak. And that all had to take place before Yitzchak was born. So true, it was definitely not a situation of perfection that Avraham Avinu was living in the time when he had no circumcision, but nevertheless, that was part of the requirements of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Simply, spiritually speaking, also, Avraham Avinu had to grow up in a situation of avodah zarah. That Or Kasdim, is that any place for a nice Jewish boy? Right? That Or Kasdim were a place filled with avodah zarah. That was the main place in the world where avodah zarah was practiced and manufactured. Avraham Avinu, his father was a salesman and a producer of avodah zarah. I mean, could you imagine Avraham Avinu coming from a better background, right? What a place to come from! What a family to come from! A place of avodah zarah, and this is the place where the father of monotheism is going to grow up and be raised. So nevertheless, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu required. So likewise, that imperfection that Avraham Avinu experienced the whole time that he had not yet had a circumcision, that was part of achieving the perfection that HaKadosh Baruch Hu eventually wanted him to achieve. The lack of perfection is many times the actual way that a person achieves his perfection. So Avraminu knew all these things, and therefore he waited for the command of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to achieve the mitzvah of bris milah at the time when he's commanded, rather than do it from a voluntary point of view. Yeah. Let's take a look now at the Radak.
He chol hagoyim, because all the goyim are uncircumcised. Ata perush mul the perush ba'orla ki ba'orla amar al ha'akum shehem arelim. Okay, so the explanation of circumcision and of foreskins, since about a foreskin, it says concerning the non-Jews that they are uncircumcised. And about circumcision, it says concerning the Jews, since even though shehem mulei basar, that they're circumcised in the flesh, hem arle leiv, they're uncircumcised in the heart. Uyin le in la'anash, and they're befitting to be punished. Below Amar al ha'akum, and we don't say about a non-Jew, shehiyu anoshim, that he is punished, ba'avur ha'orla, for the because of the uncircumcision, because of not being circumcised. He lo not neat tavu Allah, because he's not commanded about it. Ella ba'avur Yisrael amar. Rather, it's because of Israel that it's stated.
In the statement of the Navi here, right? The Navi wanted to juxtaplicate the situation of the non-Jews as being uncircumcised, Arelim, in comparison to the Jewish people, who they are circumcised in the flesh, but nevertheless they remain uncircumcised in the heart. And just as being uncircumcised in the heart is a degradation, likewise being uncircumcised in the flesh is also a degradation.
But it would seem to me that the juxtaposition of the idea that Jews are circumcised in the flesh but not circumcised in the heart is to their discredit, because it's saying they have the advantage of the benefits of the circumcision of the flesh. Nevertheless, they're insensitive. So the non-Jews who don't have the benefit of the circumcision of the flesh, they should be less culpable for being insensitive. I mean, it doesn't even say that they are insensitive. He doesn't say anything, just
You're right,
says,
you're right. You're right. There's no criticism of the non-Jews, and there's no culpability of the non-Jews. Nevertheless, means that also there's no command. There's no command. Similarly, just as there's no command for the Jew to circumcise his heart, right? There's no command. Nevertheless, they should realize that if you're insensitive, you are lacking a true heart. Likewise, the situation of a non-Jew being an oral is also a situation which is undesirable. The two cases are parallel to each other.
and what is this last part of the sentence that it says, rather because Israel, it says, what does it mean? It says,
That the El Bavur Yisrael Omer, meaning the whole mention of the non-Jews here of being a railing was for the sake of the contrast to the Jews. The Navi wasn't coming to give a criticism of the non-Jews for being a railing. That wasn't the point of the Navi. The Navi was coming to say that the insensitivity of the Jews is despicable, just like the fact that the non-Jews are not imperfect, right? They're imperfect. Likewise, for the Jews, having an insensitive heart, being uncircumcised of heart, that's also a imperfection. It was mentioned specifically
non-Jews is
criticism of the Jews. Right. Okay.
Weiter?
Yeah.
Klomar, hare shebo kechol hagoyim shehem arelim selo nivdalo min ha umos. That is to say, behold, that it comes that all of the non-Jews are uncircumcised, that they're not distinguished from the nations. But mil some in their circumcision, ella she yiv dalo mehem, but that they are separated from them. Gam Cain, likewise, b'ma'asehem, in their deeds, the kavan she ma'asehem, to ma'aseh ha'akum. And since their deeds are like the deeds of the non-Jews, the haim are lave, and they are uncircumcised of the heart. They, the Jews, are uncircumcised of the heart. Lo to'alim milas habasar. They didn't benefit from the circumcision of the flesh.
Right.
The hare haim keilu lo milo, and behold, they are as if they were not circumcised. Ki milas ha basar nene, cause the circumcision of the flesh is given the liveris for the covenant, ulaos, and for a sign, le hayos segula, for them to be a treasure, mikol ha'amim, more than all of the nations, la'avod es Hashem, to serve Hashem, kamo she'amar the vrisolam, as it says, an eternal covenant, lihios lecha, will be for you, leilokim, for a God, I will be for you for a God, ulazaro, and for your offspring, acherim, after you, the nechtam, and I have sealed, and you and there's a sealing, os basar, a sign in the flesh, leman yizkaru tamid, in order that you will remember forever, ki haim niv dalim min ha'omos, because they are separated from the nations.
All right. Very good. Now he makes in summary the next two lines and as a summarization. And he says v'hoil vis avru begoyim, and since they are mixed, they're assimilated. Since they're assimilated amongst the goyim,
Well, where are you reading the word hoil? I don't remember that.
the whole it says v'hei ki heim nivdalim min ha'umos, that they should be separate from the goyim, right? V'hoil vis avru begoyim, continues on.
Oh, I see. It's the next paragraph.
Yeah, next paragraph, right?
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were summarizing what I just read.
No. These next two lines are a summary, basically.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what I meant. That's what I meant.
V'ho'il v'ha ta'arvo v'goyim. Okay, ho'il means since.
Oil since, right? Oil means since.
Okay, so since, and what is this word? Ha ta'arvo?
Right. A terubis is a mixture. So taharuvu bagoyim, they're mixed. Since they're now mixed, they're assimilated amongst the goyim. Since the Jews are now assimilated against the goyim.
Okay, I see. V'lamdu mi ma'asehem, and they learn from their deeds. That is, the Jews learn from the deeds of the non-Jews. Arei haim kehaim. Behold, they are like them. Ke'ilu hafru ha bris v'ha'os v'eno lahem lelokim. And it's as if they have forsaken the bris,
Right.
and the sign, and they have no God. Ki bacharu tav Elokim.
That would be Elohim Acharim. That's what that.
Elohim Acharim, because they have chosen
Foreign.
instead
Yeah.
other gods. Lefichach, therefore, Amar Achar Zeh, therefore it says after this, Al Derech Hagoim, Tal midu gomer. Therefore, it says afterwards, after this, don't travel the way of, don't go the way of the goyim uh, to learn, etc.
Right, don't go in the ways of the non-Jews that you'll come to learn from them. It'll rub off on you.
So in
So,
other words, there's no difference
Yep.
between Jews and non-Jews if the Jews are not sensitive and keeping themselves separate.
right, correct, right. That's right.
But the Jews are circumcised, so
That's what he said. There's no benefit. There's no advantage if the Jews are not going to be separate from the goyim in their behavior. There's no advantage. There's no intrinsic advantage of the circumcision. Because the whole point of the circumcision was that they should be separate and distinct from the non-Jews.
but I thought up until now we've been saying how the lack of a circumcision is a despicable disgrace for the non-Jews, and the Jews have a certain perfection because they have the circumcision.
Right, but there's nothing intrinsic. It all depends on their actual behavior. And since if they're insensitive in the heart, if they don't have the sensitivity in their hearts to realize that there must be some difference between them and the non-Jews, then there's no intrinsic advantage of the actual removal of the foreskin.
So now I'm confused about the point that it's making when it discusses the lack of circumcision for the non-Jews. It would seem to me that it's based on the last part, it's saying it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the lesson of the circumcision is taken to heart.
Yeah, so obviously it's simply not it's much more than simply the event that takes place on the 8th day for the child, meaning the child, the infant, which is a newborn, an 8-day-old newborn, it doesn't relate to the mitzvah at all. So it can't be that that's the extent of the mitzvah, right? The mitzvah must extend much farther and wider than what occurs on the 8th day of a child's birth into this world.
Right. Whatever time.
Okay. All right. Here's Hashem. We'll try and go into some more details on this. Okay. Tomorrow's Erev Shabbat, so if you'd like 9:30 tomorrow, something on the Parsha. Roy, you should have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
And fine, thank you, you as well. And we'll start the Mr. Berura here in a few moments, Mr. Shem. And so we'll be back shortly.
All right, thank you. Bye for now.
Okay, great.
Right.
Thank
Be
you.
well. Be well, Roy.
Okay, see you both soon.
Okay. Phone call.